showed you how we could get those from a triangle. Remember we made those right triangles and got the ratios from the sides, and I told you that today we are going to work on tricks for how to learn those. So, my trick for you today is using our hands. Okay? I gave you a table. We are going to fill in. These are all of the special angles. 0 and 90 we had on our last test. We were drawing the XY axis and using those points to evaluate. The 30, 45, and 60 we did yesterday. But my trick will help with all of those. So on your hand, so you're looking at your hand, your fingers are going to represent your angles. So your thumb is 0 degrees, your index be 30, 45, 60, and 90. Okay, that's our main angles that we are going to need to know. When we are looking at these, we're going to think sine on the top and cosine on the bottom. For sine and cosine, our pattern is going to be square root of something over 2. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the hand trick and then we'll fill out this table in a minute. So just look at me for a while. So if I want sine of 0 degrees, okay, fold in your 0 degree fingers. So fold in your thumb. Sine is the top. So how many fingers do I have above the one I folded in? 0. So sine of 0 degrees is the square root of 0 over 2, which is just 0. When we drew our picture for our last test, remember that was the point 1, 0, and r was 1. Sine was y over r, and we got 0, right? Cosine is the bottom. So if I want cosine of 0 degrees, square root of our number of fingers over 2. So how many fingers do I have below the one I folded in? 4. Square root of 4 is 2, and 2 over 2 is 1. Isn't that what we got when we did the x over r before? Okay, so let's look at 30. We did 30 in our notes yesterday. So sine of 30, sine is the top. How many fingers do I have above the one that I folded in? 1. So square root of 1 is 1 over 2 is 1/2. Is that the value we wrote down yesterday for sine of 30? Yeah. Cosine. So the bottom, how many fingers do I have below the one I folded in? 3. Can we simplify the square root of 3? So it stays radical 3 over 2. So now if I did 45, what would sine be? We have 2 above, so radical 2 over 2. Cosine would be radical 2 over 2. If I said 60, sine is radical 3 over 2. Cosine would be 1 over 2. At 90, okay, I don't know about you guys, my pinky does not fold in. Can you guys fold in your pinky? I have to hold it. I cannot. You can? I am not physically capable. My pinky is, yeah. See, some of you can. I'm not capable.
I have to have both my fingers done.
You have to do both of them?
I might be cranking up, but it's okay. I'll walk out of here like that.
Yeah. So cosine would be, I'd ask for cosine first. I tricked you.
Oh.
Cosine's the bottom. How many fingers do I have below the one I folded in? 0. So it's 0 over 2 or 0. Sine of 90 would be radical 4 over 2. So 2 over 2 is 1. Do you guys understand this hand trick? Okay.
Does it only work for those two functions?
Well, that's a good question. If we have sine and cosine, what other ones do I automatically know? What'd you say?
Tangent.
Oh. Okay, we can get tangent from that. And hold that thought, we'll get there in a minute. if we have sine, we automatically know cosecant because they're reciprocals. And if we have cosine, we know secant. So right there with that trick, we got 4 of our functions. But remember, in the last chapter, we also said that tangent is sine divided by cosine. So we also have our tangent. Now, as a shortcut, you don't actually have to do like 1/2 divided by radical 3/2. If we're using our hand trick, bless you, tangent is just going to be square root of the top over square root of the bottom. So for instance, if I said tangent of 60, you fold in your 60. How many fingers do we have above? So it would be radical 3 over radical 1. So radical 3 over 1 is radical 3. Tangent of 45 would be radical 2 over radical 2, which is, what's anything divided by itself?
2 over 2.
If you got the radical off the bottom, you get 2 over 2, which is 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. Don't let the radicals trip you up. If I said tangent of 90, if you fold that in, you have the square root of 4 over the square root of 0. Undefined. You can't have 0 on the bottom. Good. Okay. Let's take this chart then and fill it out together. So these are incredibly important. They're going to come up all the time. We need to make sure we know the values, but if that hand trick makes sense, then it's pretty simple to get all of these. Do you guys have any questions about the hand tricks? Anybody struggling with that? Okay. Josh, you want to hit that first light switch there so we can see this a little bit better? Okay, I'm going to show you a lot of patterns in this. Let's just work on the hand trick to fill it out for now. So for sine of 0, hold in your 0. So what would sine be? 0. Okay, let's just go down the list. If sine is 0, we automatically know that cosecant is undefined. Okay, these are reciprocals, so if you have one, you just do 1 over that to get the other. Okay, cosine would be the square root of 4 over 2. So that gives us a 1. And then I know cosine is the reciprocal of secant. What's the reciprocal of 1? Just 1. Okay, tangent. Tangent, I told you, square root of the top over square root of the bottom. How many fingers do I have above this? So we have square root of 0 over square root of 4. So that's 0 over 2 is 0. And that means that cotangent would be undefined. Okay, let's do 30 together. So if I fold in my 30, what would sine be? Square root of 1 over 2, so 1/2. That means that cosecant is, what is the cosine of 30? We have 3 fingers below that, so radical 3 over 2. So for secant, when I do the reciprocal, if you flip that, you get 2 over radical 3. So get the radical off the bottom, and we get 2 radical 3 over 3. Okay, tangent, square root of the top over square root of the bottom. So we get the square root of 1 over the square root of 3. So that's radical 3. Can I leave it like that? Now get the radical off the bottom, and we get what? Okay, cotangent's the reciprocal of that, so the reciprocal of 1 over radical 3 would just be radical 3. Why don't you guys try to fill in the next 3 columns, and then we'll compare. So let's see how we're doing. So 45, fold in your 45. So sine would be radical 2 over 2. Cosecant, the reciprocal of that would just be a radical 2. Cosine's also radical 2 over 2, which means secant is radical 2. Tangent, radical 2 over radical 2 just gives you 1, and the reciprocal of 1 is 1. Did we get our 45? 60, fold that in. So sine is the top, radical 3 over 2. Cosecant, the reciprocal of that is 2 radical 3 over 3. Cosine is the bottom, radical 1 over 2, so 1/2, which means secant is a 2. Tangent, radical 3 over radical 1, which is radical 3. Cotangent, the reciprocal of that is radical 3 over 3. Any questions on those? So 90, if we fold in our 90, sine is radical 4 over 2. So square root of 4 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. That means cosecant would also be 1. Cosine is the bottom. The square root of 0 over 2 is 0. So secant would be undefined. Tangent, the top, radical 4 over the bottom, square root of 0, what do we get? Undefined. Cotangent, what's the reciprocal of undefined?
0.
Good. Okay. There are other tricks I can give you for this if we need them. So I don't want to give you too many options, but it's just going to confuse you. So you guys tell me, where are we at with the hand trick? Do you like this one, or do you need a different trick?
If we practice it, we should be fine.
You like this one? Okay. So we will just keep doing this, and every time we evaluate them. Alright, let's move on in our notes then. I want to decide if these are true or false, and we are going to use our table to help us answer these questions. So the first one, the tangent of 25 degrees is less than the tangent of 23 degrees. Alright, look at your table. Let's look at tangent as we move down this table. So tangent, as we go over, starts at 0. Radical 3 over 3 is like 0.8. 1 square root of 3 is like 1.7. Is it getting bigger or smaller as we go on? Bigger. So for tangent, a bigger angle would give us a bigger value. So which of these should be bigger? Tangent 25 or tangent 23? This should be larger. So is this statement true or false? Because this is a less than symbol. So it says tangent 25 is less, but we know it should be bigger. Now, how could we double check ourselves? We have a calculator. We're going to, in the next section, start talking about using our calculator to evaluate some things too. Cosecant, let's look at cosecant. So it starts out at undefined. 2, square root of 2 is 1.4. 2 radical 3 over 3 is like, I don't know, 0.7-ish maybe. 1, is it getting bigger or smaller? Smaller. So in this case, a bigger angle should be a smaller value. So 44 is bigger, so this should be a smaller value. So is this true or false? True. So these questions are just trying to get you to look at your table and recognize some patterns. Any questions there? Let's look at this one. So if you're going to write this down, write down x equals 30, y equals 45. Those should be degrees. You don't have to write down the rest of the directions. So then part A, we want 2 sine of x. So if we plug in x is 30 degrees. So this means 2 times the sine of 30. So let's use our hand trick. Fold in your 30. So your 30 is your index finger. Sine is the square root of the top over 2. So it'd be the square root of 1 over 2, which is 1/2. 2 times a half is 1. So that's our final answer. So we're just practicing with these main values. On your homework, try using the hand trick and then double check yourself with the table. That way you're giving yourself the opportunity to practice. So sine of 2y. So if I plug in my y is 45. Working in the parentheses, 2 times 45 is 90. So if I fold in my 90, sine is the square root of the top over 2. I have 4 fingers above. Square root of 4 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. C. For sine of 3x, x was 30, minus 90. So 3 times 30 is 90, minus 90 is 0. So 4 times the sine of 0. So if you fold in your 0, sine is the fingers above, we have 0 over 2, so it would be 0. Final answer is 0. Are those okay? Now let's do a couple more like that. So 2 times the cosine of 30. So fold in your 30, that's your index finger. Cosine is the bottom, so that would be a radical 3 over 2. And we get what happens to those 2's? They cancel, so we just have square root of 3. Do not give me decimals on these. I want the radical answers whenever possible. Alright, next one. I apologize, my exponents, when I typed this, came out really weird. This is sine squared of 45 and cosine squared 45. When you see that sine squared of 45, it means take the sine of 45 and then square your answer. So, everybody, hold in your 45 fingers. Josh, hold in your 45 with me. So what would sine be? Radical 2 over 2. Minus 2, we already said sine of 45 is radical 2 over 2. What's cosine of 45? Plus cosine of 45 squared. Alright, if I square this, the square root of 2 squared is just 2. Over 2 squared is 4. 2 over 4 is minus 2. Radical 2 over 2 times radical 2 over 2 gives me a 2 over 4, so another 1/2. Plus radical 2 over 2 squared is 1/2. Simplify this, 1/2 plus 1/2 will be a 1. 2 times 1/2 is 1, so we have 1 minus 1, which gives us a 0. Alright, C, I want everybody to make sure you write this one down, because this one always trips people up. There's a square out here. Tangent of 45 plus the tangent of 60 squared. Tangent of 45, so if you fold in your 45, tangent's the square root of the top over square root of the bottom. So radical 2 over radical 2 is just 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. Tangent of 60, if you fold in your 60. So it'd be radical 3 over radical 1. So radical 3 over radical 1 would give us radical 3. Now, can I just square each of these things? Yeah, we have to write it twice in FOIL. So we get a 1 plus radical 3 plus radical 3 plus, that's just the square root of 9, which is 3. Add like terms, so 1 plus 3 is a 4. Radical 3 plus radical 3 is 2 radical 3. So we'll have questions like that. Practicing evaluating. Are there any issues or questions about that? Do you guys understand where I'm getting all my values using the hand trick? The last example I want to do, we'll do at least one of these. If we need a second one, I'll do a second one. Please write it down. You're going to have some on your homework like this. So I want the exact value of each variable here. So just draw this picture for me. Okay. I want all 4 values, so I need to know what A, B, C, and D are. Our trig functions only work if we have a right triangle. So that's the first thing you have to know. So I cannot use the whole triangle in this, but I could take part of it. For instance, if I just looked at this, would you guys agree that that one triangle is a right triangle? So we could use trig functions. If I want to find B, from my 30-degree angle, B is opposite, 12 is the hypotenuse. What trig function involves opposite and hypotenuse? Sine. So we're going to set this up. The sine of 30 degrees, because that's the angle I'm viewing from, is the opposite side, which is B, over the hypotenuse, which is 12. Sine of 30 is radical 1 over 2, so 1/2 equals B over 12. So if I want to get B by itself, I can just multiply my 12 over, and I get B equals 6. We have a couple options for getting D now. If it's a right triangle, Pythagorean theorem would work. And we could also do another trig function. Since I'm practicing the trig functions, I'm just gonna keep doing that way. From my 30, D is the adjacent side. 12 is the hypotenuse. What function involves adjacent and hypotenuse? So the cosine of 30 equals D over 12. It's not the only way you could have done it. You could have used this 60-degree angle down here. You could have done tangent because we know the value of B now, B over D. So cosine of 30, if I look at that, cosine's the square root of the bottom, so square root of 3 over 2 equals D over 12. So if we multiply our 12 over 12 over 2 would reduce to a 6 radical 3. So I know my D. Did I lose you? Okay, if you multiply those, you get 12 times the square root of 3 over 2. And then I did 12 divided by 2. Let me ask you a question. In this, we have a second right triangle, this little one over here. If you look at it, if this angle is 45 and this is 90, what's this angle up here? 45, isn't it? Because they have to add up to 180. If those angles are the same, these sides have to be the same. We just said that D was 6 radical 3, so I know automatically that A is 6 radical 3. Okay. We could get C by either Pythagorean theorem or trig function. Which way do you guys want me to work it? Trig function. Okay. So from here, C is the hypotenuse. I can use either A or D. Let's say I just went with the opposite over hypotenuse. What trig function is that? Opposite over hypotenuse? Sine. So the sine of 45 equals D, which was 6 radical 3, over the hypotenuse, which is C. Sine of 45? Square root of 2 over 2. So then if we cross multiply, radical 2 times C is C radical 2. 2 times 6 radical 3 is 12 radical 3. What would we need to do now? Try and get C right still. Okay. I can't leave that radical 2 on the bottom. So if I multiply on top and bottom, I get 12 radical 6 over 2, which would give us 6 radical 6. And we found all 4 variables. So on those, you need to set up your problem, and you'll have to do trig functions or Pythagorean theorem to find everything that's missing. Are there questions there? I want to give you guys the rest of time to work now. So yesterday, we're just adding to that homework. We left off problem 37 was our last one. So adding to yesterday's on page 51.